I came home from a work trip to find my husband had changed the deed on our house to his brother's name. When I confronted him, he said, "It's for tax benefits, don't worry." I grabbed my lawyer's card and said, "Great, he'll love this lawsuit you just gifted him." His face went white. "Hi, my name is Shelby. I'm 48 and I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Or at least I did, until everything I thought I knew about my life unraveled right underneath me like some tragic, slow-motion rug pull. I don't write stuff like this. I don't do blogs or journals or even social media outside of sharing photos of my dog, Trixie, every now and then. But when something shatters you in a way that makes you question reality, your choices, your sanity, you either talk to someone or you let it eat you alive. So here I am, talking, writing, trying not to shake. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens when the betrayal is so casual, so calculating, that you realize the person you shared a bed with, made coffee for, folded laundry beside for nearly 2 decades, might never have really seen you as a partner at all. Just a pawn. I'd been married to Darren for 17 years. We didn't have kids, couldn't, in fact. We'd tried, early on. There were doctor visits, tests, tears, a few hopeful months, and then that door closed quietly and forever. I think part of me still mourns it, even though I pretend not to anymore. Our life was steady. We had a modest, but cozy home near August Park. I worked as a regional manager for a packaging distributor, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and then some. Darren used to do contracting work, though it had been years since he'd taken a full-time gig. His last project was installing a deck for our neighbor's sister 3 years ago. After that, it was odd jobs here and there. I didn't push. I figured after 17 years, we'd earned the right to coast a little. We had a Labrador named Trixie. She was our kid, really. I'd wake up to find her snuggled between us, tail wagging, like she was the glue that held us together. Every month or so, I had to travel for work, visits to clients in Albany, Buffalo, Binghamton, you name it. Quick trips, 2 or 3 nights at most. Darren would usually text something sweet while I was gone. Something about missing me, or what leftovers he was heating up. Sometimes a photo of Trixie on the couch. So when I left for Albany in late January, I wasn't suspicious of anything. I kissed him goodbye like I always did. He kissed me back, arms loose around me, distracted maybe, but not cold. I remember that trip clearly because it was boring. Meetings, lukewarm coffee, fluorescent lighting. At night, I sat in the hotel lobby reading reports with a glass of Pinot. He texted me, "All good here. Trixie keeps looking at the door like you're about to walk in. Miss you." I smiled at the screen, tapped out a quick, give her a hug for me, and didn't think twice. I got home on a Sunday evening. Late January cold, wet snow sticking to my boots, my suitcase while clunking over the front step. I fumbled with the key, shoulder aching from my laptop bag, expecting to hear the usual bark and the scramble of paws. But Trixie didn't come. I blinked. The house was dark except for a lamp in the living room. Quiet, too quiet. My first thought was, maybe Darren took her for a walk? Then I saw his truck parked out front. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. Neat. Still, it gave me a strange feeling. Like someone had cleaned up too carefully, like the kind of tidiness you do when you're hiding something. Darren was upstairs in the bedroom when I walked in. He greeted me casually. Said something like, "Hey babe, how was the trip?" I noticed he didn't come down to help with my bags. "Where's Trixie?" I asked. "At the vet," he replied, not looking up from the TV. Routine checkup. That didn't sit right. I handle the vet appointments. I knew there wasn't one scheduled. I opened my mouth to ask more, but something stopped me. A weird feeling. Like something wasn't lining up, and I didn't even know what question to ask yet. I wandered into the dining room to drop my coat. That's when I saw it. A stack of documents sitting slightly askew on the table. My name on the top sheet caught my eye, and before I even knew what I was doing, I was reading. Property transfer deed. Grantee, Malcolm Rowe. I read it twice. Maybe 3 times. The word swam. Malcolm was Darren's brother. His useless, shady younger brother who'd once tried to convince us to invest in a weed dispensary startup in New Jersey, despite having 0 business experience and an actual criminal record. He lived off women, drank like a sinkhole, and couldn't hold a job for more than 3 months. My heart was pounding. I felt cold in my fingertips. I went upstairs, the paperwork in my hand, and stood in the doorway of the bedroom. He looked up at me with mild curiosity. Not fear, not guilt, just irritation. I said, very calmly, "Why is our house deed in your brother's name?" He blinked. "Oh, that. It's just for tax reasons. You don't need to worry about it. Just like that. Casual. Dismissive. Like he'd rearranged the spices in the kitchen. I didn't speak right away. I stared at him, my mouth dry, hearing the soft hum of the bedroom heater. He took a sip from a glass, whiskey, probably, and turned his attention back to the television. That's when something inside me clicked. I reached into my work bag and pulled out the business card of a lawyer I'd met years ago. Fran. She helped my coworker through a divorce that nearly killed her. I'd kept her card all these years, tucked away just in case life got messy. I held it up. Great, I said, voice flat. She'll love the lawsuit you just handed me. Only then did he react. His expression changed, just for a moment, panic, I think, but he tried to cover it with a shrug. It's not what you think, he said, suddenly standing, hands slightly raised. No, I asked, because it looks like you tried to steal our house. He said something else, I don't remember what. My ears were ringing. I walked out. I needed air. It was the following days that did it. That slow, terrifying unveiling of everything he'd been doing behind my back. Fran got on it fast. Turns out, Darren had transferred the house to Malcolm 3 days after I left for Albany. He hadn't even told Malcolm I was a co-owner. The notary had been a friend of Malcolm's. The whole thing smelled illegal. We found more. Credit card debt. Gambling withdrawals. Cash transfers. Some of it to a woman named Tamron. Tamron wasn't a business associate. She wasn't a tax specialist. She was a 31-year-old yoga instructor from Wilkes-Barre with a public Instagram and no filter. I'll never forget seeing her page for the first time. Post after post of beach pics, brunch selfies, and then, there they were. Her and Darren. Together. Laughing. A boomerang of him feeding her a strawberry with a cheesy caption. When he says he's finally leaving his wife for good face-blowing kiss, that's when I stopped crying. That was the moment the numbness turned into fire. I documented everything. Sent it to Fran. The photos. The messages. The receipts. I stopped sleeping. I was sick with anger, but also with shame. How had I not seen it? How long had this been going on? I couldn't look at Darren. I moved into a motel for 2 weeks while we sorted things out. He tried texting, calling, leaving notes on my car. Let's talk. You're overreacting. This is all a big misunderstanding. But I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. The motel I checked into was a dingy little place off I-81. One of those budget chains with scratchy sheets and a tiny coffee pot bolted to the wall. But for a while, it was the only space where I could breathe without looking at him. I didn't even pack properly. Just threw some clothes into a bag and grabbed Trixie's food and her leash. She sat in the passenger seat the whole time, head on my thigh, as if she understood something had broken and there was no fixing it. For those first few nights, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the noise of the highway buzzing outside, trying to unravel every moment of the last few years. What was real? What was just performance? The next morning, I went to Fran's office with everything I had. I was still shaking. She sat me down, handed me a coffee, and told me to breathe. Then she asked to see everything. The deed. The financial statements. The screenshots of Tamron's Instagram. The texts Darren had sent me after I confronted him. She read them slowly, her eyes narrowing in that focused, surgical way lawyers have when they're preparing for war. This is bad, she finally said, for him. That's when I started to feel it. Not anger yet. Not satisfaction. Just the beginnings of something steady and cold. A sort of steel spine forming where the grief had been. Fran moved fast. She filed a petition to halt any transactions tied to the house, freezing the title. Then she filed for divorce on grounds of fraud and marital misconduct. She explained the risks, what we were walking into, how these things could drag on. But I didn't hesitate. I told her, do whatever it takes. 2 weeks later, Darren served me with a notice. His lawyer, some guy named Connolly from a small firm downtown, had filed a counterclaim. Darren was alleging abandonment. Said I traveled excessively for work, that I emotionally neglected him, that I pushed him away. That my absence was what drove him to make certain financial decisions without consulting me. I laughed when Fran showed me the paperwork. Laughed so hard I cried. I had been the one working, paying the mortgage, grocery shopping, making dinners, walking Trixie, taking care of his mother when she had surgery. But apparently my business trips were emotional abandonment. Connolly was slippery. He wasn't brilliant, but he was aggressive, and that made him dangerous. He was the kind of man who smiled as he insulted you, who knew just how far he could go before it became defamation. He tried to push for mediation, not litigation. Said we should keep this civil. said that Darren had only transferred the house, temporarily, to protect it from some pending debt. That Malcolm was just a placeholder. Fran leaned forward and said, very softly, we're not settling. What followed were months of discovery. Bank records, phone records, statements from neighbors, vet appointments, gas station receipts. Every thread pulled tighter and tighter until the whole web started to show. Turns out Darren wasn't just trying to move the house into Malcolm's name. He'd already started the process of opening a second mortgage against it. Had that paperwork gone through while I was still in Albany, I could have come home to find a lien I never signed for against a house I no longer owned. I confronted Malcolm once. Ran into him at a Wawa, of all places, while I was filling up my car. He looked surprised to see me. Like maybe he thought I'd vanished into the ether after the documents got filed. I asked him flat out, why'd you agree to it? He took a long sip from his coffee and shrugged. Darren said you knew. I stared at him. You really think I'd hand you my house? He looked down, suddenly fascinated with his shoelaces. It was just on paper. Just on paper. The phrase kept echoing in my head for days. Just paper. As if a person's entire life, their home, their security, their trust, could be shuffled around like Monopoly deeds. I think what cut deepest was how little guilt either of them seemed to feel. Darren kept texting me, acting like I was making things worse by lawyering up. That we could have just talked it through. Like what he did wasn't betrayal. Like I was being dramatic. He even had the gall to send me flowers. Fran told me not to respond. He's baiting you, she said. He's hoping to catch you saying something emotional that they can use against you in court. So I said nothing. I went silent. I blocked his number and had Fran forward anything legal. The depositions were grueling. I had to sit in a conference room, staring across at Darren as he testified under oath that he had no intention of deceiving me, that Malcolm was just helping him manage finances, and that Tamron was a friend who he'd loaned money to. A friend who posted kissing photos. A friend he wired over $12,000 to in 6 months. A friend whose apartment he listed as his secondary residence on a rental application. Fran played them all. The screenshots. The transfers. The dates. The receipts. The judge didn't say much during those sessions, but I caught the moment his eyebrows twitched. The moment he leaned back in his chair and scribbled something with a little more pressure. Then there was the phone recording. Malcolm had apparently bragged to Tamron during a call that Darren was going to take the house, kick the wife out, and start over clean. Tamron, God bless her stupidity, recorded part of the call on her phone and posted it to her Instagram story. As a joke. Fran found it, downloaded it, preserved it. That recording turned everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just a marital dispute. It was a fraud case. Asset concealment. Maybe even a conspiracy charge if we wanted to push it. After that, Darren's call stopped. So did the flowers. His lawyer called Fran instead, asking for a meeting. A settlement conversation. But I wasn't ready to settle. Not yet. Emotionally, I was holding on by threads. I didn't tell many people. Just my sister in Pittsburgh and my friend Loisa who worked in accounting with me. They came by sometimes. Brought me frozen meals. Forced me to shower. Sat with me while I flipped through old photo albums, pointing out all the times Darren had worn fake smiles. The worst part? I missed him. Not the real him, whoever that was, but the version I thought I'd married. The man who rubbed my back when I had migraines. Who bought me daffodils every April because he knew they reminded me of my mother. Who once drove through a snowstorm to bring me my laptop when I forgot it on a trip. I kept thinking, where did that man go? Or had he never existed at all? I started therapy. Fran recommended someone. I was hesitant, but I went. One night, sitting on a worn couch in a quiet office with tissues in hand, I finally said aloud, I think I loved a character he was playing. The therapist nodded. That's a kind of grief. Mourning someone who was never fully real to begin with. I went home and cried for hours. Trixie curled up against me, silent, patient. The weeks after the deposition felt like limbo. Everything was technically in motion. Court dates were on the calendar. The house's title was frozen. Lawyers were drafting motions. But on the day-to-day level, it felt like I was just waiting. Waiting for the next legal email. Waiting for Darren to try something else. Waiting for it all to be over. I went back to the house once. I'd needed to pick up some paperwork, tax documents I hadn't thought to grab when I left. Darren was supposed to be gone during the window Fran negotiated, but when I pulled into the driveway, his truck was there. I sat in the car for a while, hand on the ignition, debating whether to just turn around. But I needed those files, and I was tired of running from the house I paid for. I walked in through the garage door, expecting confrontation. But the place was empty. Or at least, it looked that way. I moved quietly, collecting the file folders from my home office. The house was still neat, overly so. It didn't look lived in. No new furniture. No signs of Tamarin. Just the echo of what had been my life. As I passed through the kitchen, I saw a glass in the sink and an ashtray on the counter. Darren never smoked when I was home. Maybe he always had and I just didn't know. Or maybe that was new, like the woman whose perfume had faintly settled into the cushions in the living room. On my way out, I paused by the front door. We had a photo hanging there for years, us on our anniversary in Vermont, holding glasses of wine, with Trixie's head peeking out between our legs. It was gone. Just a faded square on the wall where the sunlight hadn't hit. That absence hit harder than I thought it would. I left without saying a word. A few days later, Fran called. "They're offering a new settlement," she said. "Significant equity, plus payment of your attorney fees." I asked, "Does that mean they think they're going to lose?" Fran didn't answer directly. "It means they want to make this disappear before the judge hands down something even worse." We met with Darren and Connolly again. The room was cold, literally and emotionally. I brought Loisa with me for support. She sat behind me the whole time, occasionally squeezing my hand. Darren looked thinner. Not in a sick way, just worn, uncomfortable in his own skin. His hair was longer. His shirt sleeves were rolled up like he'd just come from doing something labor-intensive, which I knew was a performance. Darren didn't do anything labor-intensive if he could help it. Connolly started talking. Fran cut him off. "No statements today," she said. "We're here to review numbers." They offered me a 60-40 equity split. I nearly laughed. After everything. After the lies, the cheating, the forgery, the asset transfers, they still thought I'd take less than what was rightfully mine. Fran smiled politely and said, "We'll see you in court." That was the last time I saw Darren in person. Things got quieter after that, but in a strange, suspended way. I kept living at the motel for another month before finally moving into a short-term rental on a quiet street near Lake Scranton. It was small, 2 bedrooms, old hardwood floors, and a kitchen that creaked every time I opened the cabinets. But it had a fenced backyard, and Trixie could finally run around again without a leash. I started leaving the windows open during the day, even when it was still cold. Something about the air felt necessary. Cleansing. At work, I threw myself into every project I could. Late nights, extra reports, regional sales meetings. Anything to keep my brain too busy to spiral. People started asking questions, of course. My coworkers noticed the ring was gone. A few tried to gently pry, others just gossiped behind my back. Loisa shut them down fast. "She's going through hell," I heard her say once to someone near the break room. "And she's doing it 10 times stronger than most people would." Some days I believed her. Most days I didn't feel strong at all. I felt brittle. Like something cracked beneath the surface might just split open if I moved too fast. But there were also moments, small ones, where I remembered who I was before the marriage defined me. Before every decision had to be run through someone else's comfort level. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself at the farmer's market near the courthouse. I bought a loaf of fresh rosemary bread and a tiny jar of fig jam. For no reason. Just because I liked it. I took it home, poured myself a glass of wine, and ate half the loaf with cheese on the back porch while Trixie snoozed in the sun. I didn't take a picture. Didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone. It was just for me. Meanwhile, Fran kept digging. She uncovered an account Darren had opened in his mother's name. One he'd been using to squirrel away money from a client who hired him for handyman work. The mother claimed not to know about it. I believed her. She was always sweet to me, even after I left. But the fact that Darren had involved his own mother in his financial shell game only made things worse. It added another layer to the case: financial misrepresentation, potential elder abuse, depending on how the court viewed it. Fran started talking about criminal exposure, and Connolly went noticeably silent after that. That was when the delays started. Darren's side filed continuances, claimed illnesses, claimed scheduling conflicts. One time, they claimed a clerical error had pushed their discovery submission back 2 weeks. Fran saw right through it. "They're stalling," she said. "Trying to make you tired. Hoping you'll cave." But I wasn't the same woman I'd been when I walked into her office 4 months earlier, shell-shocked and trembling. I'd been through the worst of it, and I was still standing. Somewhere along the line, my numbness had turned to grit. And I wasn't backing down. The court date was set for the first Monday of August. By then, the summer air had settled thick over Scranton like a damp towel. My new rental didn't have central air, so I spent a lot of nights on top of the covers with the windows cracked, listening to cicadas buzz and dogs bark in the distance. The waiting was over. I had no illusions about Darren suddenly doing the right thing. This was it. Fran and I met at her office the day before the hearing. She laid everything out for me in her usual clear, unflinching way. Our evidence was airtight: the fraudulent deed transfer, the financial deception, the recordings, the gambling losses, the fake business arrangement with Malcolm, the wire transfers to Tamron. And we had the added bonus of Darren's failed attempts to use my business travel as grounds for abandonment. They're going to push for a settlement again, Fran said, sliding a folder toward me. But I wouldn't take it. Not unless they give you everything we asked for and then some. I looked through the papers. Her voice was steady. She wasn't just confident. She was ready to draw blood with paperwork. I nodded. Let's go to war. The courtroom wasn't as dramatic as I'd imagined. Beige walls, hard benches, a few fans rattling in the corners, but there was a stillness in the air when the judge walked in, as if the whole room knew something important was about to be decided. Darren sat across from me, looking thinner, paler, nervous. Tamron wasn't there. Neither was Malcolm. The only person with him was Connolly, who looked like he'd aged 20 years and 4 months. The hearing lasted hours. Fran methodically dismantled their narrative, piece by piece. She presented the forged deed transfer and the forged notary signature, which, under oath, the notary eventually admitted was unorthodox. She showed the bank records, the wire transfers, the photos of Darren and Tamron, the voice recording of Malcolm bragging about the plan. When Darren tried to claim that Tamron was just a friend, Fran played a clip from a voicemail Tamron left on his phone, a sugary little message about how excited she was to move into their house after the drama was over. His face turned red like a flare had gone off under his skin. The judge didn't need long. He ruled the deed transfer invalid, called it an intentional act of deception with intent to defraud a co-owner. The house was ordered fully reinstated in my name. But that wasn't all. Darren was ordered to pay me 70% of the total home equity as restitution for his misconduct, plus all my legal fees. He was also hit with a formal reprimand for attempted fraud, which went straight into public record. He'd never be able to apply for a housing loan again without that black mark staring him down. As for Malcolm, the judge issued a separate referral to the state attorney general's office to investigate his role in the notary fraud and possible tax evasion. That case is still ongoing, but the fallout started quick. Last I heard, Malcolm had left the state, tried, and failed, to open a consulting business in Delaware and is now couch surfing with his second cousin. Darren tried to speak after the ruling. He stood up, cleared his throat, and started with, "Your Honor, if I may." The judge raised a hand and said, "You've said enough, Mr. Rowe." Fran and I walked out of that courthouse without saying a word to him. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need a last jab. He already knew. I sold the house a month later. For a great price, too. The market was climbing and buyers were bidding fast. The sale went through cleanly, and when the wire transfer hit my account, I stared at the number on the screen for almost 20 minutes. Then I called a realtor in Lancaster, a place I'd always dreamed of living but never admitted to out loud, and I bought a small 2-bedroom stone cottage with a garden and a wraparound porch. No mortgage. No cosigner. Just me. I didn't make a big announcement. I just packed up my life, rented a U-Haul, and left Scranton with Trixie in the front seat, her head out the window, ears flapping in the wind like she was smiling for both of us. Life didn't go back to what it was. It never could, really. But it changed in ways I never expected. I planted herbs in the garden, took up pottery classes again at the local community center, something I hadn't done since my 20s. I joined a small book club that meets every Thursday at the bakery downtown. Most of the women are older than me. I like that. We talk about stories, yes, but mostly we talk about life. Grief, resilience, regret. They don't ask about Darren, and I don't offer. Every now and then I hear things through the grapevine. Tamron left him a few weeks after the hearing. Something about him not being who he said he was. She's now dating some guy who owns a gym in 40 Fort. Darren is living in a rented duplex outside of town. His credit is shot. He tried to sell some of his tools online, but ended up fighting with the buyers about delivery fees. That's how small his life has gotten. Nickel and dime drama on local buy-sell pages. He called once. From a number I didn't recognize. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. "Shelby, I messed up. I know that now. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I hope you're doing okay." I listened to it once. Deleted it. Then I took Trixie for a walk and picked out a new rosemary plant from the market. I didn't need revenge that involved screaming or shaming or slamming doors. I didn't need to burn his life down with gasoline and a match. He did that all by himself. All I did was get out of the way and make sure he couldn't take me down with him. And now, I wake up every morning, make coffee in my little sunlit kitchen, and open the screen door to let Trixie out onto the porch. She does a happy little spin and runs into the yard, barking at nothing in particular. The birds start early here. The air smells like honeysuckle. And I breathe. That's enough. That's more than enough.